Hi everyone, it is 21st of August 2013 and I would like to get into the stages of spiritual evolution while also addressing Christianity, and I found an article that perfectly says it all actually. So since I get a lot of mail from Christian people, some really aware, others less, I would like to address the subject and to say this. I see us human beings as souls on a quest, an evolutionary process, and the spiritual growth takes place in several stages, you could say. Now, during history, people with a certain awareness used to be called witches, burned at the stake by the Inquisition, etc. People have been persecuted through the ages and still are. They are still asked to repent because they have knowledge, because they truly understand. And I think that this understanding can only come because you already have a certain level of awareness, some at birth, others within this lifetime. They managed to learn a lot and to experience a lot, because it's only by this experience that you can actually know and understand it. Now, there are a lot of people who have certain religion, Messiah, gods, but they don't really understand the words spoken, the scriptures. So I even see a lot of Christians who really do not understand Jesus. They have no clue because they address their religion according to the level where they are at that moment, and some are not spiritual at all. They are not open. They are explaining everything, all these words, from a material point of view, right? So they never grasped the real meaning of the words. Only the people who had certain revelation, and I see a lot of people with near-death experiences, etc., who make a giant jump, or by already having achieved that in former lives. I do believe in reincarnation. I see these people with a certain wisdom and love in their heart, and it's very beautiful to see. So it's in India with certain people who left everything behind, and I mostly don't mean the tourists, although some of them are, but a lot are not actually. They're just following all the leaders and the satsangs, and they don't really understand it either. They're in their intellectual set of things, of thinking, which is also not the answer, just as science isn't. But okay, I would like to go into Christianity here, and so I would explain some things to you through this article. And it starts with a beautiful poem saying, "And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, 'Give me a light, that I may tread safely into the unknown.' And he replied, 'Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to your better than a light, and safer than a known way.'" So we have the stages of spiritual evolution here, and it says there are 4 levels of spiritual growth. First is from individual to collective to universal to divine. We all make this journey because we belong to the divine, and yearn for the divine and seek to reunite with the divine. And it is the movement of love, the most powerful energy in the universe. And it is expressed at the time of Easter in a self-offering, it says here, and sacrifice of love that was made for humanity. Divinity is clothed with a frail human body, which is shattered to reveal love unlimited. The cross is a sign of love unlimited. We are called upon to offer ourselves, to joyfully give our lives as a living offering of love. And if you open yourself up to love, it will possess you and raise you up. So the journey of spiritual evolution culminates in the experience of oneness with the divine. And it's the journey from unconscious unity, represented by example by Adam and Eve, to conscious unity, represented by example by Jesus. So, in the beginning, man lived in unconscious unity with the divine in the Garden of Eden. There was an experience of unconscious mutual indwelling. The divine lived in them and they lived in the divine. So they were innocent and walked naked with the divine in the coolness of the evening breeze. But there was no awareness of consciousness of the unity. At the deepest level, they were already like the divine, having been created in the image and likeness, but it was an unconscious original innocence and purity. So they had no free will. They obeyed this God, the divine, who was a God of authority, and told them to do this, do that, this is right, that is wrong, and this authority was imposed from the outside. So there was an obedience to the will of the divine and harmony resulted. But then they say they rebelled against the divine authority and they ate from the apple. So they rejected the authority, even the authority of the divine, and rebelled against it. But what they did was necessary to start a journey of spiritual evolution. Becoming an individual is the first step in the process. So this free will belongs to the evolutionary process of the consciousness. We are growing into it and then surrendering it again. It's like saying, "Thy will be done," when the divine is acting in and through us in order to be really free. So we have to learn the divine's plan of salvation, which involves doing thy will as opposed to doing my will, and living the life of spirit as opposed to following the dictates and demands of your ego. Disobedience, it's the same as my will be done, takes you away from the divine, as with Adam and Eve. And obedience, thy will be done, brings you back to Godhead, as with the second Adam and Eve, which you could say, by example, Jesus and Mary. So, with the fall of man, we lost the original purity and godliness as we fell into a lower nature. And that fall was necessary from an evolutionary point of view. It's a fall in that man becomes self-centered. But it's a growth in that it's necessary for this evolution. We have to grow back into that state of purity and oneness. But we do so through our free choice, for love has no value unless it's freely given. And the divine wants us to reunite in love and freedom. So, this Mary and Jesus figure are the new Adam and Eve, and they are needed to give birth to the new man that is God-centered, lives in Christ consciousness, aware of unity with the divine, and the new earth to enjoy the kingdom of this God in our midst again. Now, second stage is an individual mind. This Adam and Eve gave birth to the original sin of separation with the divine, wanting to do their own thing apart from the divine. becoming self-centered instead of divine-centered. And when we act from ego consciousness, our actions are not grounded in the divine, but come from ourselves as a separate entity. So instead of being a servant and an instrument of the divine acting through you, you become the one acting. In that way, you perpetuate the original sin and separation from the divine. So actions are done for me. I am the center of the universe. I do my best. That's what you get then, to fulfill my needs, my desires, my will, rather than thy will. So I will decide what's right and wrong based on my preference, likes, dislikes. Humanity fell from acting in accordance with the dictates and purity of the spirit, which is oneness with the divine, to acting based on lower nature, which are governed by body and mind and their involvement with and attachment to sense pleasure. So the actions become impure, and this is where sin enters the picture. So rebellion, however, is necessary and part of the journey of spiritual evolution. To move beyond this God of authority to become an individual, and then to surrender one's individuality. The fall of man was necessary in order that the relationship with the divine can be transformed. So this God of authority, whom people had a relationship with based on fear, has to become the God of love, with whom a relationship is a joyful celebration, and it's based not on authority but on love. Just like, by example, in the New Testament, when the law is written in the heart. So then you go to a collective social mind. And a beautiful words of St. Francis of Assisi here is, Lord, grant that I might not so much seek to be loved as to love. So after becoming an individual, you have to make the transition from the individual to the collective. During that stage, you realize that you actually cannot be an individual, because nothing happens in isolation. Your actions affect others, and their actions affect you. You can only act because of the actions of others. So everything we know, we learn from others. Everything is interconnected to all. And by realizing the interconnectedness, one goes beyond the idea of a separate self. Then it goes to a universal, conscious, universal mind. And it says, I am the Father is in me, it says here. I would always like to refer to Mother, Father. But, okay. In this stage, actions are done for the welfare of all. You are aware of the interconnectedness of all things. You know you are not acting for yourself alone. And the selfish work for their own benefit, the wise work for the benefit of all, said Shantideva. That's a Buddhist saint. So because you're not acting for an individual self, but for all, you cease to create personal karma, as it's called. Whatever you give coming back to you. At this level you go beyond duality and beyond karma. It's no longer I, but the divine that lives and acts in me. The works I do are not my own, but the divine's will who dwells in me. By your surrendering your actions to the divine, the responsibility and the burden of interconnectedness is taken away. Now, in the final stage, the divine stage, a conscious unitary mind, you really realize that, as Jesus said, I and the Father are one. Experience of non-duality, as we say in Advaita in India. In the final stage, you realize your unity with God, and it's a non-dualistic state. This world is a duality, everything separated into two, night and day, old and young, beautiful and ugly. You can go on, male and female, black and white. But in the final stage, you realize your unity, it's one. There is no blasphemy or arrogant to say. It's actually very humble, because you acknowledge that only the divine is, and you have no reality apart from it. So you and the divine are one, and you have no reality apart from it, because the deepest reality, only the divine, exists. Only the divine is acting, and you go beyond judgment, beyond good and beyond bad. And to live in the divine means to accept everything, not judge. You go beyond karma. When you realize union with the divine, then you are no longer bound by karma. Because it's not you acting, but the divine acting through you. All your actions are surrendered to the divine. And you know it's the divine acting and not you, because only God is. Even Jesus said, it's not I who do these works, but I. So you are free from karma, because actions are done by the divine. Actions done by the divine do not bind the soul of man. It says in the Upanishads, the old scriptures from India, if you are not the doer, then there is no karma. So the circle is completed, and you have come back to the beginning. You come from God, you go back to God. So as well in the beginning as in the end, you are one with the divine. There's once again unity, but now it's a conscious unity. You participate in this Christ consciousness, which is one with God, and this union is expressed as bliss or love. It's salvation, liberation, freedom, moksha, enlightenment, and you can call it Satchit Anand. So when this Jesus said, I am the Father are one, he completed the evolutionary process of human spiritual growth. Unconscious original unity became conscious unity in him. And he knew that his oneness with the divine from the beginning, that he came from it and he will go back to it. But this experience is not limited to Jesus alone. He only made a blueprint of the spiritual journey for every human being, that we may die to the false self, our ego, to be resurrected in love and born into eternal universal divine consciousness. So out of this infinite glory may the divine give you the power through his spirit for your hidden self to grow strong, so that the divine may live in your heart through faith and planted in love and built on love. You will grasp the breadth and length, the height and depth, until knowing the love. You are filled with the utter fullness of the divine. Beautiful, isn't it? So I have spoken